Welcome everyone to episode 46 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today I talked with Ish Quan, who's an artist, producer, and engineer out of Melbourne, Australia. In this episode, we talked about pushing the artist outside of their comfort zone, offering as much value as possible when doing outreach, as well as creating as many products as possible in order to upskill yourself. If you could do us a favor and share this podcast in as many places as possible, on your social media, in your DMs, in actual conversations with people, help us spread the word of this podcast. We've got heaps of cool stuff coming, and you can stay up to date by hitting follow or subscribe on all of the social media platforms and all of the podcast platforms. We're releasing new episodes all the time, so you can stay in touch on there. If you want to get in touch with us via email, you can send an email, podcast.whatsthatsound@gmail.com. All of these links are in the show notes, so check it out whenever you like. Let's get into this new episode 46 with Ish Quan.
You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts.
Welcome everybody to another episode of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts. Today I am here with Ish Quan. Ish, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Nice to meet you, everyone, and thank you, Stu, for having me on the podcast.
You're very welcome, mate. No worries. Well, to kick us off, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in the music industry.
So I've been working in the music industry now I would say, my 5th year working in it. I've always been around music all my life. I went and studied at Box Hill and did my sound production bachelor's degree. And yeah, from there, I started working in the industry while I was studying, around 20 years old, and started working with local artists and just kept sort of growing my network in Melbourne. As an audio engineer, producer. Also being an artist myself, it helps to work with everyone I work with, so I can put myself in everyone's shoes. But yeah, I did my bachelor's degree, completed that, and then just started building my network, meeting people, and working with as many people as possible in Melbourne. And then I started sort of branching out to Sydney and stuff via Instagram, which is a great tool to use.
Yeah, well, we'll get there, but that's awesome. I mean, you've racked up quite an impressive portfolio in 5 years as well, but we'll touch on that a bit later. Take us back to when you were a kid. What sort of tunes were you bumping? What was playing around your house and things like that?
Oh, that's a bit of nostalgic. It's a nostalgic question, that one. I was bumping a lot of Eminem back when I was younger. Eminem was the main, I would say, artist I was listening to, and then it was all like, what artists had, like Neo and Akon and all that sort of stuff. All the classic songs that were being played back in the day. That was the music I was listening to. And Soulja Boy. Soulja Boy was definitely one of my favorites back in the day. So I feel like I had that hip hop influence way back, but I didn't know it until I sort of grew up and got to my late 20s.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because, I mean, you mentioned Soulja Boy, but it's a funny one because he started off as like a bit of a meme, but then, you know, the music was actually quite, I don't want to say revolutionary, but it was pushing a completely different style of like trap that kind of was really underground, and he kind of somewhat brought it to the mainstream.
Yeah, he did. He's definitely a pioneer, I feel, in a lot of aspects in terms of the sound that's still going now. I feel like, he's incorporated a lot of elements into today's hip-hop.
Yeah, love it. Well, when you were, listening to music when you were younger, do you remember if you were analysing it lots, or was it very much a passive intake of music?
it was a little bit passive, but I remember looking at my iPod and being like, I want to do what they're doing. I want to know how to do what they're doing. That was a big moment for me when I was like, I think I was 9 years old, and I was looking at my iPod and I was like, I want to know how they're putting their music out on these stores and like how they're getting it to these iPods. So I remember having that initial thought. But other than that, listening to music, it was generally pretty passive. But I always wondered on how they recorded and do all that sort of stuff.
And so then did you start to look for avenues to understand that? Was it more that you just went straight into uni, or how did that happen?
Well, how I really started, like I've played guitar since I was like 7, 8 years old. And I grew up playing piano, a little bit of piano. I can't really play piano now, but I can play guitar. I taught guitar for 5 years out of high school. Yep. So that was a little side job that I had as I was finishing high school. And from there, I just started playing around on my iPad with GarageBand. Started like recording myself with my guitar, and then from there I got like a cheap little microphone for my birthday, and then I went into music performance at Box Hill to start off with for 6 months, and I didn't like it. I was like, I don't want to play in a jazz band. I don't want to play in a band at all. Like, I just want to make my own stuff. And then, so it sort of was me wanting to make my own music, and then it turned into another passion of working with other people on their stuff as well. So there was a bit of combination of that happening. And then, I ended up moving into more working with other people while I was studying. And then the biggest sort of thing that landed for me was I ended up working with Warner Australia through the label 66 Records, who you would know.
Yep.
And I was actually bringing all my gear, like my Apollo and laptop and stuff, to Marshall Street Studios, where you are now. And I started recording like Babyface, Mel, Lil J and stuff in one of the studios there. So they just called me up when they had a room back at Marshall Street. I started coming in, and then, that's when Marvin also was recording them. Yep. Shout out to Marvin. He's an awesome dude.
Yeah, shout out Marvin.
And so that was sort of, that was, I think he's been busy with life. Yeah, so from there, it's sort of like I was doing other stuff outside, working with just local people who I can't think of at the moment. They'll pop in my head soon. But 66 Records was definitely one of the pivoting moments of like, oh, this is like actually a thing now.
And do you remember kind of those sessions when you first were getting into them and things like that? What were you thinking? What were the kind of, I guess, eye-opening things? And what was it also about it that you were like, okay, I can do this sort of thing?
It's a good question. I feel like just the feeling of being able to bring someone's project to life was like a wow factor, and in the sense of like you can actually make a job out of doing that is rewarding. I don't know if that quite answered your question on that.
Yeah, well, I guess like, what specifically in those sessions were things that, I guess surprised you, or did it kind of go as expected?
Oh yeah, I feel like there's always little things, little speed bumps along the road of when you're starting off that sort of can stuff up a session really easily. But those sessions went fairly smooth. I think it was more like learning about CPU problems and like how many plugins you can use during a recording session. I think that was the main thing.
Yeah.
That was a big learning curve for me. And making sure my sample rate was low and making sure my input gain was at the right level as well.
Sure,
Because everyone always doesn't have the input gain at the right level when they're starting off. They're always crunching it or it's too low.
Yeah, it's funny that it's like these fundamentals that like if you don't have right will make such a huge impact. But then, you know, once you understand them, it's like you don't even have to think about it, you know, like, and I guess that happens with all sorts of learning, but those little things like at the start can be really big hurdles to where it's wrong and you're like, I really just don't know how to figure this out.
Yeah, I think fundamentals when you're starting off are a big speed bump in like getting good at what you're doing.
Yeah, so like fast forwarding a bit to now, like what do the sessions look like now? I know your time is split between a few different things, engineering, mixing, you know, that sort of stuff, and you've got your own solo project as well. So I guess what's the difference between how you do things now and back then?
Yeah, I guess it's more passive in terms of the skill side of it. Like I've built up all my templates and stuff like that, and I work a lot off my templates, but I don't just work to my templates. Like each session changes to each song that you do. But yeah, I've built my own templates with a lot of different plugins and stuff, and that's been a good journey of learning different processes and applying them all together. So I feel like, yeah, it's almost second nature to me when recording mixing. I feel like mixing, there's always like it's always changing. There's always something different. So you can't just slap on presets on mixes and send them off. Like you actually have to sit there thoroughly and adjust each element. And yeah, there's always something different when you're mixing a lot of stems, especially. But yeah, I would say everything's pretty passive for me. Even when working with artists in the studio, like I apply a lot of the same processes to a lot of different people, but they come out of it differently as well. So,
And so what sort of things do you notice that are the same, like with working with different artists, and what things differ?
Well, you'll have a lot of different artists that can sing better than other artists, and I guess you have to sit there and help each artist individually, and that takes different amounts of time. So yeah, if an artist can sing, then I'll utilize that and I'll make them sing on a track if the track suits it. But if they can't sing, then we'll add other elements to benefit the track, even though they can't sing on a track. Or if they're just rapping, on the track, and I think that they could add these extra elements of like maybe melodic ad libs or something like that, then I'll get them to do it. So I try and push an artist as best I can in the direction that will make the track the best it can be.
I love it. And it's funny that because obviously everyone's at different levels and there's always different and depending on the style, it can depend on what sort of things you add into a track and stuff like that. But I feel like it's always really important, at least for me, to always push someone who I'm recording, even if it's not vocally, if it's guitars or drums or anything. I want to push them like just higher than where they are comfortable, because then you're stretching what their abilities are, as well as, you know, what is possible for the track, because it'll always spark something else. Like there's always going to be a level where it's like, oh, I don't feel comfortable at this. And then you just say, just go for it. Ignore what your brain's telling you to shut down and just go for it and see what happens.
Yeah. I do experience a lot of that in sessions where they're not comfortable to try like singing like an octave higher or something like that, and you just make them do it. And then once they get through being able to do it, they realize that there's this new like thing that they can add to their music. And I guess it goes past music as well. It's like a confidence thing. It's like they could use that mentality anywhere else as well. So yeah, I think it definitely helps whoever you're working with a lot more than just the music as well.
Yeah, and I guess when it comes to that, you're building confidence with the artist, but you're also building trust, because anytime someone feels challenged by something, they have a hesitation for whatever reason. It could be self-esteem, it could be ability, it could be things like that. But once you kind of break this threshold of where they think they're comfortable and you push them past that, and it gets to that point where they're like, oh, fuck, that was cool. I didn't know that was possible or whatever. You've built trust, and they can then, from then on, anytime you might suggest something that's a little bit out of their league or whatever, they probably won't hesitate as much next time to do that sort of thing.
Oh, definitely. It's like you're putting training in place for future tracks that they're working on. And then they can take that sort of skill anywhere, whether they're recording at home or recording in another state. It's like they can take that idea with them and utilize it. So yeah, always trying to provide value as much as possible, because it's more than just us clicking a button for them. And I feel like that's also another big issue, like with our industry. There's a lot of button pushers as well that probably don't provide as much value as they should.
Yeah, it kind of lowers the overall level of the I guess, yeah, even Melbourne or Australia or whatever, it just could potentially lower that. But I think there'll always be that. I think in any music little hub or anything like that, there'll always be kind of that bunch of people that don't care as much about that or pushing that boundary and things like that. And obviously there'll always be someone that steps above. But I guess when you look at your overall, percentage of where you're spending your time, do you mind kind of talking us through what your percentages look like, engineering, producing, mixing, creating your own music, that sort of thing?
For sure. I feel like I'm heavily, at the moment, I'm doing a lot of mixing and mastering, and then I'm working on a lot of my own stuff. The producing and like making beats has sort of taken a backseat at the moment, because there's only so much time that we have in a day. Like we've got to go complete projects, or if you have like other day jobs and stuff, then you got to do those as well. So, and then trying to train and keep fit as well. I'm a big advocate for trying to keep myself fit as well. So I got a lot of things I tie around my day. And yeah, I feel like mixing and working on my own stuff has been what I've mainly been doing lately. But I try and do as much production as possible. Like I've been making a few beats this year already. But yeah, I went heavy on the guitar loops back in like 2020. That landed me like a little placement with a fairly big artist in Dubai. Named Sandra Sahi, her name is. And so the song was in French, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I was pretty stoked about that opportunity that came about. But I met a lot of people like back in 2020, before the COVID period happened. I was just sending a lot of like guitar loops out to as many people as possible. Like I would go through Instagram and DM as many people as I could. Even like I didn't know any of them. Like I just put my foot out and just spoke to as many people as possible and say, hey, like, do you want some guitar loops? Like for no money or anything, not trying to sell people stuff. And eventually like money sort of came in return because of that. But I wasn't trying to do it for the money. It was like I was trying to build the network and collaborate with as many people as possible. And
Yeah.
out of that, I got over hundreds of beats from that, and I brought those to my recording sessions here in Melbourne, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So doing a bit less of that now, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I think when it comes to, say you're engineering or in a production session or something like that, especially in hip hop and those sorts of genres, artists are pretty fluid with kind of the work of how a session goes. I find that most people don't necessarily have this, like, I want this song done, I want this song done, I want this song done. Maybe later in their career it changes, but I guess in the early stages of an artist's career for that style of music, they're pretty much like, let's just go with the flow and we'll see what happens. And so having those options available to the artist is, again, important in building trust and building, like a good relationship with them, because they can see that you work hard because you've got all of this stuff built up, and, you can go from there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a few artists that come in and just freestyle all their sessions, but I don't tell everyone to do that, because there's some artists that can't do that. Like, they need to actually write their music before they come in. So before I do a recording session, I ask for like some sort of demo if they have it, to see where they're at musically, because obviously I want to work with people at a certain standard as well. Like, I will take in new people that are beginners, but they still have to have been writing music at least, so they have something to show for, so that they're not walking into the studio and then walking out with like half a verse.
Yeah.
So it's like we want like a full body of work.
And so talk us through that process. How do you ensure that is, something like, do you have a vetting process, or talk us through that?
Yeah, usually I get the artist to send me their music or demos. If they're fresh off the bat, I'll get them to send me tracks that they've done, so I can hear where they're at and what needs to be improved. And usually it's generally always the mixing side of it that needs to be improved, and even the delivery. Like, I get a lot of artists that are just used to recording like a whole track in one take.
Yeah.
And it's not the way to make a record at the end of the day. Like, we're going down to little parts of a word in our session. So yeah, I filter through people that way and make sure they're ready for what we're going to do in our sessions. But like, I'm never usually saying no to people. But if I ever have said no to people, it's been like, well, go work on your writing a little bit more, and then we'll be ready to go.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it.
I love it. Well, I want to kind of learn more about how do you see yourself like leveling up over time, and what steps do you take? Are you conscious about, keeping on learning new tools, learning new ways of doing things? How do you consistently try and level up?
I feel like analyzing your work at a more thorough level, you can start to see, okay, what can I tweak here in what plugins I'm using, making sure. I mean, because I studied, like I sort of know the proper way of doing my process. In terms of audio land, like, I know what to put before what plugin. Like, I'm not just slapping plugins after plugins. There's a certain process. Like, I'm de-essing before my compressor, I'm EQing before my compressor. and then you got your post EQ. So yeah, all of that stuff, I've sort of got that nitty gritty stuff out the way. But in terms of leveling up, like I feel like I'll level up more as I'm networking with as many more people as I can, especially overseas. Like I want to try and bridge off to the overseas as much as possible. Because I've got a good network here in Melbourne. It's like Melbourne's only going to grow with the population at the end of the day. And like I'm doing a lot of stuff from Sydney. Like I'm working on a lot of DJ Nino Brown's tracks. So we've just done a whole album's worth of content
Unreal.
over the last 6 months. And yeah, so that's been a great project to work on. So I've worked on probably, I'd say, 10 of his tracks in the last 6 months. And he's brought multiple artists like DSP. Well, he had DSP on a track, and then he's got Free Souls, Pookie.
Yeah, wow.
Who else is on there? Oh, a bit of a mind blank. I'd have to go. Yeah. There comes to a point where you've worked on so many tracks and you start forgetting. I'm sure you would completely understand that. It's like you forget all the big tracks that you've done sometimes.
And the little details of each track and things like that, for sure.
Yeah.
I want to touch more on the networking side of things, because we've talked a little bit about it here and there. You know, you said when you were first, you know, especially doing the guitar loops, and when you were first in sessions and stuff like that, you were doing a lot of DMing in Instagram and things like that. What are, do you think, the most important ways of how you network, and what has landed you more new clients and kept old clients and things like that as well?
I'm going to say it straight off the bat, and that's doing stuff for free. As much as people don't want to hear it, doing stuff for free will get you probably it will get you more further than the people that are just trying to sell you something straight off if they don't know who you are. So if you're trying to work with someone, like you're better off saying, hey, send me a track to mix, and just do it for free. That's if you're trying to build your network.
And I guess when you're reaching out to people and things like that, what does that process look like? Is that all just, you know, cold DMs on Instagram? Is it friends of friends, all that sort of stuff? Or you know?
There's a lot of cold DMs, I guess, that do happen, but also there's friends of friends and word of mouth. Like locally, there's a lot of word of mouth stuff that happens. Like your name gets passed around pretty quickly in Melbourne, as you would probably know. Everyone talks. So word of mouth is a big one. But yeah, in terms of trying to build your network outside of that, cold DMs are definitely a way to go. But also it's like, are you going to listen to their music before you DM them? Like, do you actually want to work with this person, or are you just trying to like chase money? It's like, there's a fine line between like actually wanting to work with someone or chasing money. And I feel like people will get mixed up with that. And it's like, well, you got to want to love what that artist or that producer is doing before you go send them a message.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like you're right. People can tell it so quickly these days, you know, when it comes to Instagram and messaging and that sort of thing. Like as soon as you receive a message, you're kind of on alert. You're kind of high on alert. You're like, oh, what does this person want from me? And if it seems ingenuine, or, you know, like you can just kind of read it straight away. It's pretty easy to tell. And that I find is the real difficulty now, as opposed to 5 years ago when you're inboxing people and things like that. The radar is just set a little bit higher, or I mean a lot higher actually. And so you've got to find a way to be genuine. You've got to find a way to really connect with someone. And as you said, you know, checking out their tunes or just doing half an hour's worth of research about the person, so you can have a little bit more of an conversation wise about how you approach them.
Yeah, definitely. I think that has come with us being more on our phones and stuff over the last few years. Everyone's a bit more alert and wary of fake conversations via social media. I think everyone's a bit more trained up in that aspect and knows what to call out and knows what's not real at the end of the day.
Yeah. Let's talk about, when you're collaborating with an artist as opposed to working on your own stuff. What do you find the key differences are there, and what are the pros and cons of both?
So the difference between working on another person's track and my music. I guess there's like what I like is always different to what the other artist likes. That's a big thing. It's like I'm generally pretty set on when I record, like my sound's pretty like 80% done, and then it's just tweaks and stuff from there, and then obviously the mastering's the last step. But there's always the artists that I'm working with that I'll apply maybe some of the processes that I like on my music and blend it in, but they might not like that. So then that like pushes me to work in different areas and add different like effects, like different reverbs, different delays, or maybe barely any reverb or delay on their vocals at all. Or like I'll go through and chop up a track and do heaps of beat cuts and stuff, but they might not like that. So they just want the track to play out. So it's forever changing in that aspect. And I feel like as we get more on with music, I feel like we're starting to do like a full circle sort of thing. It's like there'll be less sort of things happening in songs, and it will go back to the more raw sort of sound.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, in the last few months, it's gone pretty crazy with all the production level on tracks, and it's like people will come back to just wanting the track to be as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really funny how it goes in waves, and genres pop up and they disappear and this and that can influence what even tracks in different genres sound like, and it's always fun to navigate that. And I find you can never predict, unless you've been working with an artist for a bunch of times, you can't really predict whether someone's going to want that high production value type stuff with lots going on, or whether they whether they're going to want it more raw and organic sounding. And it is funny, like we might think, this will be so sick, I'm going to do this like delay throw or like a reverse sweep or something like that. They'll be like, nah, cut it out. It's like too much.
Yeah, you'll spend a bit of time doing a reverse vocal and then they don't like it.
Yeah. I guess when you look at, how far you've come with, working on so many different tracks and even producing your own stuff and things like that, do you wish you did anything differently at the start, when you were first learning?
That's a good question.
Or I guess, is there anything that you feel like you spent maybe too much time on that you would give, if for anyone listening, you'd advise them not to focus too heavily on certain things?
I feel like the social media aspect of music, like trying to focus on social media and music at the same time, it's a hard thing to do. I feel when you're starting off, you should just focus on the music, because if you're trying to do the social media and the music, you're not going to develop to your full potential in your music at the start. So really focus on bettering your writing or your mixing, whatever you're doing, your beat making first, and then do the social media stuff. There's no point trying to post beginner stuff because no one's gonna like it at the end of the day, and that's the harsh reality. If it doesn't sound good, then like it's gonna be hard to get that scene. So I think, yeah, as you're starting off, definitely just focus on the music as much as possible instead of trying to post on social media about. I mean, it's good to vlog your beginning part. Like take little videos that you can later look back on, but yeah, don't heavily focus on the content making side until you're at a decent standard. And you can apply
definitely like this.
You can apply that across whether it's you're making your own songs or you're making beats or you're mixing or you're even like making content about audio and mixing and stuff. Like fully develop your skills before you're giving out information. And I feel like there's a big issue. There's a really big issue with misinformation in our industry, and you'd probably know this. But I see a lot of YouTubers spilling out rubbish audio information, and it's like, no, that's actually not the way it is, or that's not the proper process. There's a lot of misinformation now, and that comes to social media really taking over a lot of things. So there's a lot of people labeling themselves as engineers when they haven't really done the hard yards, or they haven't studied in. Assuming you've studied as well.
Yeah, I
Stu.
studied. Yeah.
There's a lot of people that haven't studied and they're just coming in first year off the bat saying they're an engineer, and they're giving out all this content and information, but it's theoretically wrong.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And it's one of those things where you have to learn all the foundations and learn the right way to do things so that then you can break those rules. But without knowing whether it's right or wrong to begin with, you're starting yourself off on the back foot, and it can be really difficult. And I would think that it's really difficult for anyone that's starting now with the amount of information that's out there, how to filter through the bullshit. Like it's, there's YouTube channels that look amazing and look really professional, and then you listen to them for 2 minutes and you're like, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. And it can be really difficult to know where you stand when it comes to those sorts of things when you're first learning. And so for me, I think it's important to gather as much information when it comes to that sort of stuff. So, and then apply it, because you never know whether something's right or wrong without actually applying it yourself. And learn for yourself and say, yeah, did it work this time? Yes or no? Why? Or why didn't it work? And then try the opposite and say, okay, well, that makes more sense that works now.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel like gathering and testing different informations and putting them side by side and seeing what is actually the real source is definitely a good way to test it.
100%. And I think like also when you're, first starting, or even when you're first studying and you're trying things out, it feels like it works. It's that Dunning-Kruger thing of like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. And then, you learn that you're actually like way lower than the actual level where you thought you were. And then it takes a little bit longer to build up to actually the understanding of that thing. But I think for me, the advice that I always give is just like, you have to try all of these techniques and in as many different scenarios as you can. You've got to just take action on it. You can't sit and think about, oh, I heard this is the way to do it, or I heard this is the way to do it. The only way you really know whether you're on the right path is actually taking action and trying it in different sessions and trying out on different sample packs or different EQs and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Oh yeah, I think definitely making mistakes is the best way to learn, and I think everyone says that, and it's actually a true saying for sure. Yep. And yeah, you gotta filter through and make a lot of crap music before you get to where you actually want to be. I think it's a really big thing. And yeah, keeping consistent and just making as much stuff as possible. Like last year, I made over 100 songs of my own. I recorded over 100 songs. That's
impressive.
Yeah, And like I knew I had to do that because I wasn't happy with where I was at as an artist. And I was like, well, I need to like just make as much stuff as possible. And through that process, I picked out a lot of good songs and there was a lot of crap songs. So yeah, that was a really big thing for me. Even though those songs aren't out, but like that process of getting myself better as an artist and vocal delivery and lyrics, I improved like tenfold improved. And yeah, that process you can apply to beat making and mixing tracks as well. So,
And so how do you know, this is going to be a tough question, but how do you know when something hits the right way? Like how can you make that judgment on this is where it's at, like in terms of, you know, level of, you know, execution, I guess. How can you know, like what's the point where you go, this is a great production or this is a great mix, I'm killing it on this one?
I think always referencing back to great songs, like hit songs, in your genre or niche. I think the referencing's very important. Because sometimes you may think, oh, this is awesome, and then you reference it back to like a song that's doing well, and it's like, oh, it's kind of not there mix wise, or like melody wise, it's not hitting as good as I thought. So yeah, referencing your tracks is very important. And I feel like also referencing back to your other tracks. So if you've got other tracks that have done well, then yeah, you definitely should be referencing your music for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's like, I think most of us that do this profession are on the geeky side, on the nerdy side, and we're pretty analytical with like I just can't listen to any music that I've never heard before without hyper analyzing it. And even stuff that I've heard 100 times, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize they did that with the kick drum, or, you know, stupid shit like that. Oh, the reverb tail on this is really short. Like, and it's funny because there's benefits to it, and there's the obvious thing where like, I just wish I could listen to music passively again. But I think that is when you know when a song is really great, or like a songwriting technique, or, you know, a production of, or a mix of a song, is when you can just sit and go and be amazed by it and just not analyze it and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, you can forever pick at things. You could sit there and always pick and adjust things. So yeah, you always got to set yourself at some point to know when you're actually going to finish it. And I think by having due dates and stuff like that definitely helps push you.
Yep. I love that. And I think that's really important to bring up as well, as like you setting yourself deadlines and having goals for, you know, you said you did like 100 tracks. Like that must be like, what? I can't even figure out the math. That's like 2 songs a week. That's crazy. And so there has to be a point where you go, yep, I need to put a deadline on this and finish up. But like, especially when it comes to client work, you can't keep people waiting, and you can't sit on a track for ages because you're just not doing the service that you should be providing.
Yeah, I feel like on our end of being an engineer, I feel like sometimes things that slow us down is getting tracks exported the wrong way, getting the wrong bit depth, sample rate, or they're not bounced in place. I feel like that's that's a big thing that happens a lot of the time. So yeah, trying to teach the artist to send stems correctly is a very important process, and I think that helps them go teach other people the right way as well. So it's kind of an adequate thing to do, and that helps the community a bit more, whether it's locally or
100%. I love it. And so I guess to start to, you know, round off the conversation, what sort of things are you doing now, and what, what are you looking to improve on, or what are you focusing on now over the next, say, 6 months that you're really wanting to get better at, or focus on, I guess, a little bit more heavily?
Yes, that's a good question. Things I'm trying to get better at over the next few months. I feel like I haven't really thought about what I want to get better at. I feel like I'm just in the time of trying to do as much as I can and keep on pushing. And obviously, I think the most thing I can focus on is actually listening as much as possible to what the artists and the clients that I'm working with want, and making sure I'm delivering as quick as possible what they want. And I feel like, I'm trying to make my delivery as quick as possible, and providing the best product I can provide in that short amount of time, because you don't want to spend 3 weeks on a mix. And I'm not saying I do spend 3 weeks on a mix, but sometimes a mix can blow out because you're sending it back and forth a couple of times. And I want to try and shorten that process and, like, right off the bat have the song 90% done, and that's just a few little tweaks here and there.
That's awesome, man. Well, what's coming up in the next little period for you? You've got some new tracks coming out. You got some new things that you're working on with artists. Tell us about that.
Well, I put out a track myself in, when was it? February, and that got played on Triple J, which I was pretty stoked about.
Congrats.
Yeah, that's thank you. It's a thing every artist, band, or want to happen for their music. So it was been trying to get on their radar for a few years, and finally got on there. Yeah, I think I'm just going to keep making tracks as much as possible as an artist. In terms of my artist side, like, I've really been pushing on TikTok. I've been doing a lot of TikTok lives, and what I've been doing on my TikTok lives is I've been making tracks with the audience. So really diving into that sort of one-on-one with actually making music with people that don't even know you. It's a pretty cool process, and you can get some pretty cool products out of that, and that automatically makes the audience interested in your unreleased music. So in the last year, I've been doing a lot of that TikTok live stuff, and
That's
I've
awesome.
Really grown an audience, that I've grown myself out of. I've grown myself really well in that process. And just communicating and talking with people, and it really. Sorry, stuff's fallen here. That really helps your artistry, I feel. And
I mean, it's awesome, and it's obviously, you're embracing newer technologies and, utilizing these platforms for the things that they have available, and that's, so important for any new artist coming out, that, for you to kind of be ahead of the curve and break through to a market that, wasn't possible 5-10 years ago. So what sort of things did you set up, or what processes did you have in place to, and I guess what have you improved on in that regard as well?
Well, I mean, obviously I had to have all my recording equipment. So there's a bit of a process to getting to that stage of, like, I can make music on a live stream. You got to have your recording set up. Whether it's a good setup or a bad setup, you can start anywhere really, and improve the quality of your equipment later on. Obviously I've got my room and got all my equipment, and then once I started adding, like, little elements of, like, things in the background, like I added a sign in the background saying, like, writing a song with your comments, or freestyling your comments or whatever. That started bringing in a big audience. Like I started getting in like 100 people, 200 people at once. And then
Unreal.
And then across the live stream, I was getting a few thousand people. So five to 6,000 people. That was the peak of last year. I mean, the live streams have sort of died off a little bit, but I'm still doing them and still providing to those day one supporters. And it's a cool and fun process. Like instead of making music by yourself in a room, I'm making it with an audience across the other side of the planet, which is pretty cool.
Sick. Yeah, I guess it's a different type of live performance, isn't it? It's like,
yeah,
it's so cool. Unreal, man. Well, what I like to do to finish up these conversations is just to ask your best bit of advice for, first of all, engineers or producers that are listening, and then secondly, for any artists that might be checking this out.
I think to start off with, the best bit of advice I can give to you when you're starting off is you got to build your network, and you're going to have to put yourself out there and do things that you don't want to do. Say yes to everything or as many things as you can, because that's what I did. And that's what I got told, and I did it. And it really, like reflecting back, saying yes and doing as many things as possible really gets you where you want to go. And also providing value to whoever you're working with. Go that extra mile for someone. Whether it's like, you're going to make the beat for free, or you're going to do the mastering for free, or I don't know, do something, or you're going to record the first or the third track for free, whatever. Whatever you want to provide value at the end of the day, and that will go a long way, and that will keep relationships strong in terms of business and personal as well. They'll respect you more as a person if you can do stuff like that for them, in the right aspect, of course.
Absolutely. That's awesome, man. And then for any artists that might be listening?
I think you just got to pump out the crap songs. You got to keep recording, keep making music, make as many songs as possible, and filter all those bad tracks out, because you will get really great tracks out of those 100 songs you record. And I'm not the first one to say that. Like Russ has even said this a lot. He's like, go make 300 songs and then worry about the content later. Or make content for each song as you make it, and then you'll get a song that will pop out of those 300. And that's what he did. So, and I sort of applied that same mentality, and it's really helped. It's really, really helped.
Yeah. I love it, man. It's just all those little things that all add up, and you don't necessarily notice them at the time when you're doing it. But, when you look back after you have done those 100, 200 songs, you're like, holy shit, I've made all of this, for one, but two, the improvement over time that may be small and incremental when you're doing it, but it gets to the end and you're like, fuck, I'm just so much better than where I was a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. So that's fantastic advice, man. I love to hear it. But that's it. Let's wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining me today, man. I appreciate it. And you said before the podcast started that you've been doing some overnights, and so I appreciate you jumping on this morning.
Yeah, no, of course. I had to come on here. Thank you, Stu, for having me on the podcast. It was great to have a chat in about our industry and what we're doing, because it's definitely something that needs to have more light on. For sure.
Absolutely, man. Ooh, absolutely. Well, thank you again. And thanks to all of you for checking this out. If you've made it this far, please do us a favor and share the podcast, whether that's on your Instagram, TikTok, wherever it might be, in an actual real life conversation, if you have those still. Just let people know about this podcast, spread the word. We got some cool shit coming this year. I got merch planned. I've got other things that I want to start up, and live shows and Patreons and stuff like that. So big things in the works. So stay tuned and make sure you're following or subscribing on the platform that you are checking this out on. And that way you can stay up to date. But apart from that, thanks so much. And we will see you next time on What's That Sound podcast.
Thanks for listening to What's That Sound. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.